Hey folks, picture this. You crawl out of bed to the salty stench of the Aegean mingling with wilted roses, only to realize the ceiling above you is a glittering tapestry of broken hearts and golden seashells. Welcome to Aphrodite's bedroom, where love is both a sweet perfume and a ticking time bomb. Before we get lost in the myth, smash that like button if you enjoy a little romance reggaeton, and drop a comment telling us your most disastrous first date. Now, dim the lights, grab a cup of something strong, and settle in like you'd on a couch after a Netflix binge that left you questioning every swipe. You'll soon hear how the goddess sprang from sea foam, her skin glistening like fresh-caught sushi, while the gods around her whispered about beauty standards, like it was a morning meme. Imagine the ancient version of Instagram influencers. Only instead of filtered selfies, they tossed golden apples and cursed mortals with a sigh that smelled like sandalwood and cheap perfume. So tell me, which modern love monster would you rather dodge? A ghosted text or a Zeus-level bolt of jealousy? When the sea boiled over with the salty tears of the slain Titan, a frothy crown erupted, and from it sprang Aphrodite, the goddess of love, like a glittering sunrise on a stormy ocean. She rose on a silken tide of white foam, her hair dripping with brine that smelled of seaweed and sun-warmed sand. The breezes carried the scent of jasmine and the distant clamor of fishermen shouting, as if the world itself held its breath. Even the stoic gods in Olympus, who normally reserved applause for thunderbolts, let out a collective "ooh" when they caught sight of her. In that instant, the universe got a new influencer, and the mortal realm would soon be stuck scrolling through her endless love stories. Aphrodite's first steps touched the golden cliffs of Cyprus, where the rocks sang with the echo of crashing waves. She padded onto the shore, leaving footprints that glowed like fresh paint, and the locals gasped as their sandals slipped on the slick, foamy grass. The air filled with the sweet perfume of orange blossoms, mingling with the acrid tang of salt and the faint whiff of burnt incense from nearby shrines. Villagers swore they could hear a distant harp, though it was probably just a stray goat bleating in rhythm. But the point was, everyone was mesmerized. Even the resident dolphins performed synchronized flips, as if auditioning for a reality show called Sea's Got Talent. Crowds surged forward, eyes wide like moons, and children chased the glittering droplets that fell from her gown, slipping on the slick stones and laughing. A chorus of priests shouted prayers, their voices rough as weathered rope, while a jealous Ares muttered under his breath, nursing a bruised ego. The scent of roasted lamb wafted from a nearby feast, mixing with the metallic sting of blood from a sacrificial goat, creating a banquet of aromas that made even the gods' stomachs rumble. Aphrodite smiled, her grin as sharp as a freshly sharpened spear, but also softer than a pillow of cloud, and she tossed a rose petal into the crowd, which landed on a farmer's nose, causing a sneeze that echoed like a drum roll. In that moment, mortal and divine alike felt the tug of love's invisible thread, as if someone had hit play on the ultimate romantic mixtape. Whispers rose like gossip at a tavern, hinting at future entanglements with the handsome mortal Adonis, whose good looks could make a statue blush. Hera, ever the queen of drama, rolled her eyes so hard they could have been used to grind olives, and plotted to keep Aphrodite's heart from stealing the spotlight. Even the underworld's ruler, Hades, sent a cold breeze that smelled like damp earth and unpaid taxes, reminding everyone that love can sometimes be a death sentence. Aphrodite, unfazed, flicked a strand of seafoam hair, and declared, "Let them try. I've got more charm than a Greek Wi-Fi hotspot," a nod to the modern world's love of connectivity. The gods laughed, the mortals cheered, and the sea whispered back, as though the planet itself were rating this drama on a scale of epic to totally binge-worthy. Thus, the goddess stood on Cyprus's sun-kissed shore, draped in a gown stitched from sunrise and moonlight, ready to rewrite the love stories of gods and men alike. The wind carried promises of passion, betrayal, and the occasional awkward date that would make even Zeus cringe. Every footstep left a trace of glittering foam, a reminder that beauty can be both intoxicating and a slippery mess, like trying to eat spaghetti with your hands. Soon, lovers would chase her like teenagers chasing a limited edition sneaker drop, and rivals would plot like office workers fighting over the last donut. And so, dear listeners, keep your ears open, for the tale of Aphrodite has only just begun, and the universe is about to get a whole lot more fabulous. The sea breezes of Phthia swirled around the golden pavilion, where Peleus and Thetis were tying the knot, and the air tasted of honeyed wine and roasted lamb. Musicians plucked lyres while servants shuffled marble trays, their sandals clacking like a marching band on a marble runway. Suddenly, the goddess of discord, Eris, slipped through the marble columns, clutching a glittering apple that seemed to hum with its own gossip. She tossed it onto the banquet table with the flair of a reality TV star dropping a mic, declaring, "To the fairest." The guests froze, their forks mid-air as the apple's lacquered skin caught the sunlight like a diva's sequined dress. A murmur rippled through the crowd, like popcorn popping in a pan. Who would claim that shiny fruit? The elders whispered about ancient pacts, the younger maidens giggled, and even the wine seemed to slosh a little louder, as if it wanted a front-row seat. Eris's grin was as sharp as a shark's tooth. She'd missed the invite, but she loved a good drama more than any mortal feast. The apple, flawless and golden, radiated a perfume of citrus and temptation, daring any god to step up. Little did they know, this simple fruit was about to turn a wedding into the world's first celebrity scandal. From the heavens descended 3 divine beauties, each dripping in power, like a celebrity arriving in a limo. Hera, queen of Olympus, wore a crown of peacock feathers that rustled like silk scarves in a summer wind, her voice smooth as a velvet gown. Athena, the strategizer, bore a helmet polished to mirror sheen, her eyes glinting like a chessboard under floodlights. And Aphrodite, the goddess of love, floated in a cascade of rose-scented perfume, her skin shimmering like a sunrise on the Aegean. They each claimed the apple, their arguments volleying across the marble like a witty roast battle on a late-night talk show. The tiebreaker? A mortal. Paris, the handsome yet perpetually indecisive prince of Troy, perched on a marble step like a reality show judge with a crown of scrolls. Aphrodite leaned in, whispering promises that smelled of fresh roses and sunrise beaches, offering him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, a mortal whose face could launch 1,000 ships and, apparently, a few jealous gods. Hera countered with power and eternal fame, while Athena dangled wisdom and victorious battles. Paris, whose brain was perhaps still at the buffet, chose the seductive promise, his grin as wide as the Aegean horizon sealing the apple's fate with a click louder than a camera flash. The golden apple was whisked away, its gleam vanishing into the night like a dropped mic after a perfect punchline. Yet the real drama had just begun. The love Aphrodite dangled would soon spark a war that turned the city of Troy into a smoldering meme of, "Oops, we did it again." Soldiers marched, seas boiled, and the gods sipped ambrosia, watching the mortal folly like an epic sitcom with unlimited reruns. And so, from a single glinting fruit at a wedding, the seed of the Trojan War sprouted, a tale that still rings in theaters, textbooks, and the occasional Netflix documentary. When the sun dripped molten amber across Olympus, Aphrodite slipped behind the bronze doors of Ares' war tent, her laugh echoing like clinking armor. She swiped the god of battle's copper-scented cloak, feeling the heat of his forge-smoked breath on her cheek. The pair tangled in a passionate whirlwind, their sighs rattling the marble columns, as if the gods themselves were gossiping in a celestial tavern. Little did they know, every stolen kiss sent a ripple of jealous thunder rolling toward Hera's throne. Hera, who guarded marriage like a hawk guards its nest, spotted the scandal from her ivory balcony, her eyes narrowing to the size of a sword tip. She thundered a curse that sounded like a kettle boiling over, demanding that love-soaked mortals pay the price for divine infidelity. The irony was delicious. The queen of fidelity now played the jealous watchdog, barking at the very goddess who embodied desire. Even the clouds turned a sullen gray, as if the sky itself were rolling its eyes at the melodrama unfolding below. Enter Adonis, a mortal whose skin shone like freshly cut figs, and whose smile could melt the coldest marble. Aphrodite found him in a meadow where wild rosemary swayed, and their encounter sparked a fireworks show of perfume and sweat, the air thick with honeyed breath, and the earthy musk of damp soil. Their love roared louder than any battlefield, a reckless binge that felt like binge-watching a romance series with every episode ending in a cliffhanger. Yet every stolen moment tasted bittersweet, for the goddess sensed the ticking clock of mortality ticking behind his pulse. Tragedy stalked the couple like a prowling hyena, and it struck when Adonis chased a wild boar through the rust-red dust of a forgotten valley. The boar's tusks slashed like kitchen knives, and Adonis fell with a scream that echoed the crack of a breaking heart. Aphrodite rushed to his side, her tears a salty torrent that dripped onto the blood-splattered earth, mingling love's perfume with metallic iron. The gods watched, half amused, half sympathetic, as the goddess cradled a lifeless body that smelled of sun-baked hay and the faint sting of mortals' inevitable decay. In the quiet that followed, Hera's fury simmered down to a grudging sigh, while Aphrodite stared at the horizon, her divine glow dimmed by grief's shadow. She realized that even a goddess can be caught in the same messy love triangles that make sitcoms cringe, complete with misdialed texts and overdramatic exits. The lesson glittered like a broken mirror. Love and jealousy are twins, forever wrestling over the same fragile heart. And so, beneath the veil of celestial allure, Aphrodite's vulnerability shone brighter than any golden armor, reminding mortals and gods alike that passion, however divine, always carries a hint of sting In the glittering hall of Olympus, the gods staged a reality show of sorts called The Judgment of Paris, where the handsome Trojan prince was handed a golden apple and 3 dazzling beauties. Aphrodite, draped in rose-scented silk, whispered promises of the most beautiful mortal woman, her voice as sweet as honey-laced wine. Paris, blinded by the sparkle of love, voted for her, sealing a deal that smelled faintly of sandalwood and ambition. Little did he know that the apple's bite would gnaw at the peace of the Aegean, sparking whispers that would soon become war cries. The gods chuckled, sipping ambrosia, as the mortal world braced for a drama bigger than any mythic soap opera. That night, under a moon that glittered like a Hollywood spotlight, Paris slipped aboard a sleek trireme, his heart thumping louder than a war drum. He escorted Helen, whose hair glowed like sun-kissed wheat, through the salty sea breeze that tasted of brine and distant fire. The Greeks on the shore heard the distant cries of gulls and the clatter of oars, a cacophony that sounded like an angry chorus of cell phones on mute. Helen's reluctant smile was a bittersweet perfume, perfumed silk clashing with the iron scent of impending battle. As they vanished over the horizon, the city of Sparta gasped, wondering if love had just turned into a catastrophic Tinder swipe. When the Trojan walls rose in fury, Aphrodite stepped onto the battlefield like a flamboyant coach, her sandals kicking up dust that smelled of crushed olives. She shrouded Paris in a shimmering aura, deflecting arrows that hissed past like angry wasps, while the hero's sword sang a metallic hymn. The clash of bronze echoed, mixing with the acrid stench of blood and the sweet, burning incense she left in her wake. Even the stalwart Achilles paused, eyebrows raised, as if asking whether love could be a better weapon than a spear. With a wink, Aphrodite whispered, "Let the love child of chaos have a field day, turning the war into a chaotic love-driven carnival." Heroes rose and fell like the tide. Hector, noble as a seasoned boxer, met Achilles, whose fury crackled like a faulty toaster. Above the fray, Aphrodite floated, sprinkling rose petals that smelled like fresh laundry into the air, confusing the combatants who suddenly smelled their mother's kitchens mid-fight. The gods argued in the clouds, their voices booming like a stadium announcer, each trying to outwittily sabotage the other, Zeus muttering about budget cuts on love. The spectators on both sides swore they could hear a distant pop song playing, a reminder that even gods love a good soundtrack. In the midst of this divine sitcom, the battlefield turned into a stage where romance and ruin performed an awkward tango. When Troy finally fell, the city smoldered like a burnt-out grill, the air thick with ash, scorched timber, and the lingering scent of Aphrodite's rose-laden perfume. She hovered over the ruins, half smirking, half sobbing, as if watching a dramatic series finale where the lovers finally get their tragic ending. The Greeks hoisted the wooden horse, its wood smelling of pine and fear, while the surviving Trojans fled, their sandals dragging through mud that tasted like iron. Aphrodite, ever the mischievous matchmaker, whispered to the wind, "All's well that ends with a good story," as the fires crackled like a binge-watch marathon's closing credits. The tale of love, war, and the goddess who turned a simple choice into an epic saga lives on, echoing through the ages like a timeless meme. When the final clang of bronze swords died down, Aphrodite slipped away from the carnage as if shedding a bruised veil, sailing toward her secluded Isle of Cythera. The island smelled of wild rosemary and sun-baked figs, a perfume that could make even a hardened hoplite weep. She stepped onto pearl-white sand that hissed under her bare feet, like old vinyl crackling on a summer road trip. Above, gulls squawked a chorus that sounded suspiciously like a broken love ballad on the radio. The sea brushed her ankles with cool, briny fingers, reminding her that even gods feel the tide's tug. There, Aphrodite settled onto a throne of rose-petal cushions and began cataloging love's victories, from Paris's stolen apple to Helen's legendary return home. Yes, the ultimate celebrity breakup turned blockbuster. She giggled at the memory of Cupid's mischievous arrows ricocheting off marble statues, turning stoic philosophers into blushing teenagers. The air pulsed with the echo of lovers' whispers, each one a sweet hum that could outsing a modern pop star's chorus. She recalled how Zeus and Hera once reconciled over a midnight feast of honeyed figs, proving that even thunderheads can mellow. In that golden glow, she felt like the original influencer, setting trends before Instagram existed. Yet not all was rose-tinted. The goddess's mind turned to the tragedies that left love bruised and battered. She remembered the mournful sigh of Orpheus as he chased Eurydice through a cave that smelled of damp earth and stale incense, only to lose her to a cruel, echoing silence. The stench of spilled wine from the banquet of the tragic hero Oedipus still clung to the marble, a reminder that passion can spill over like a busted amphora. Even Aphrodite herself tasted the bitterness of a lover's betrayal, like the aftertaste of burnt ambrosia left to cool on a marble slab. She winced at the memory, because sometimes desire burns hotter than a furnace in Hephaestus's forge. Still, these scars only polished her radiance. Aphrodite rose like a sunrise over the Aegean, undimmed by mortals' mishaps. She wore a crown of seafoam pearls that glittered like a Hollywood award, and her smile could outshine the flash of a paparazzi camera at a red carpet gala. With a wink, she whispered that love is both a battlefield and a rom-com, a paradox that even the toughest Spartan could not resist. She pledged to keep flirting with fate, sprinkling charm like confetti at every wedding, funeral, and awkward first date. After all, who else could make a war-torn world swoon at the sight of a single perfect sandal? As night draped its indigo cloak over the island, Aphrodite stood on the cliff's edge, letting the wind tuck her hair into a breezy knot. The scent of night-blooming jasmine wrapped around her like a lover's embrace, while distant drums whispering stories of new romances yet to be born. She lifted her chalice, filled with moonlit nectar, and toasted to the endless cycle of desire that fuels gods and mortals alike. In that moment, the stars seemed to blink and sync, as if the cosmos itself were scrolling through a playlist of heartbeats. And so, the eternal radiance of Aphrodite burned on, a beacon for every swipe right and sigh of longing across the ages. In the thunder-cracked halls of Olympus, Zeus finally snapped the tyrant Cronus's neck like a bad Wi-Fi router. With a roar louder than a stadium full of chanting fans, he seized the sky crown and hurled it toward the restless Aegean. But his triumph was not just about power. It was a messy, divine prank. He flung the severed genitals of the ancient god Uranus, still slick with cosmic blood, into the foaming sea. The splash echoed across the waves like a cosmic drum roll, announcing that something wildly unexpected was about to bubble up. The Aegean roared, its salty foam mixing with the glowing crimson of divine ichor, creating a broth that smelled like burnt incense and fish market gossip. The sea churned, spitting out bubbles that glittered like fireworks at a rock concert. As the blood met brine, a luminous foam rose, shimmering with a pastel pink that seemed to hum a love song no mortal could hear. The air filled with a scent, half rose petal, half seaweed, half the afterglow of a summer bonfire, making even the gulls swoon. From this frothy cauldron, the whisper of the sea promised a new birth, as if the ocean itself were texting the gods. You up? The foam swelled, puffing up like a barista's latte art turned into a living sculpture. It glistened, catching the sun's rays and throwing rainbow specks onto nearby cliffs, as if Poseidon had hired a lighting designer. Fishermen, watching from their boats, gagged on salty spray, while swearing they saw a giggling bubble with a cheeky grin. Talk about a sea-surfaced meme. The sea's breath grew sweet, and the foam began to pulse. Each beat a thrum of destiny whispered in kelp-laced verses. Even the wind seemed to pause, holding its breath like a dramatic pause before a superhero's entrance. Then, with a gasp of surf and sparkle, the foam cracked open, spilling forth a goddess whose skin shimmered like sunrise on a mirror. She rose, her hair a cascade of sea foam curls, her eyes the deep blue of the Mediterranean at midnight, so alluring even a pirate would trade his loot for a glance. The scent of jasmine and salt swirled around her, tickling nostrils and causing nearby crabs to do a nervous little shimmy. She laughed, a sound that sounded like a chorus of conch shells and a pop culture OMG echo, and the world felt instantly more romantic, like someone had just hit like on the cosmos. The sea whispered her name, Aphrodite, while dolphins performed a synchronized routine, proving that even the ocean loves a good debut. As Aphrodite stepped onto the pearl-white shore, the waves bowed, their foam curling like applause after a perfect Netflix binge. The whisper of the sea lingered, promising love, lust, and a dash of mischief to every mortal foolish enough to stare at the horizon. Zeus, watching from Olympus, smirked, realizing his messy prank birthed the ultimate influencer of hearts. No Instagram filter could match her glow. Even now, sailors still swear that when the sea sighs, it's her voice nudging lovers together like a cosmic Tinder swipe. And so the legend rolls on, foam-capped and eternally cheeky, reminding us that even gods enjoy a little mess before a masterpiece. The moon hung like a polished coin, spilling silver across the restless sea. Under its cold stare, the foam swelled, each bubble bursting with a frothy sigh that smelled of brine and distant storms. It rose in a trembling column, coalescing into a shape as soft as sunrise on water. Even the wind paused, tasting the salty perfume of destiny brewing in the surf. Soon the foam gathered, humming a lullaby that sounded suspiciously like a chorus of ancient TikTok reels. The nymphs of the deep, sleek as sea glass, felt a tremor tickle their kelp-tangled ears. They swam in circles, their laughter bubbling up like bubbles from a soda can left in the sun. Eyes widened as a glow painted a horizon, brighter than a lighthouse on a caffeine binge. Their songs shifted, weaving threads of sea foam and sky into a tapestry no mortal had ever witnessed. They whispered, half in awe and half in gossip, that a child of sea and sky was about to audition for the world stage. On a moon-kissed isle, the gods ordered the nymphs to ready a cradle of pearly shells and smooth sandstone. The workers hauled driftwood, smearing it with algae paste that reeked of old fish markets and fresh sea mint. They painted the stone with crushed coral, producing a blush that rivaled a sunrise after a night of binge-watching. A chorus of gulls provided a soundtrack, squawking in perfect dissonance, while the tide rhythmically slapped the shore like an over-enthusiastic percussionist. Even the rocky cliffs seemed to lean in, their stone faces creasing with anticipation, as if waiting for the ultimate celebrity entrance. At the stroke of midnight, the foam erupted, and from its milky womb rose a figure as radiant as a solar panel in a sunstorm. She stepped onto the island, her bare feet leaving sizzling prints that hissed like a sizzling bacon strip on a hot pan. Auburn hair cascaded, dripping seawater that smelled of kelp and fresh cinnamon rolls. An odd but oddly comforting combo. She lifted her arms, and the moon blushed, flashing a wink that could have been a subtle nod to the Marvel Universe's Thor, the god of thunder and, well, drama. A chorus of nymphs cheered, their voices blending with the surf, as if the ocean itself were throwing a surprise birthday party. The newborn Aphrodite laughed, a sound that tingled like wind chimes struck by mischievous sprites. She breathed in the salty air, feeling the tug of love and beauty coil around her like a sea snake wearing a glittery scarf. Around her, the tide rose higher, each wave rolling in like a curtain lifting on a grand theater, announcing her reign. Even the grumpy crab king, known for his scowls, offered a tiny clack of applause with his claws, proving that even crustaceans can be moved by charm. Thus the foam's rising tide became legend, a story whispered by sailors and shouted by bartenders, reminding all that love can burst forth from the most unexpected foam-filled places. From the frothy cradle of the Aegean, the newborn goddess rose, her skin slick with pearls that clinked like tiny cymbals against the sunrise. A salty breeze brushed her cheeks, tasting of brine and a faint perfume of seaweed. Her hair spilled down in golden ribbons, shimmering as if each strand were a filament of sunrise itself. Tiny fish swarmed like paparazzi, snapping photos in their minds of the most spectacular debut since Zeus's lightning bolt. The ocean itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first note of her story. She cupped a sighing wave in her hands and listened. The sea whispered its grammar in rolling syllables of foam. With a giggle that sounded like conch shells in a rock concert, she mimicked the rhythm, learning the language of tides. Each crest taught her a word, each trough a punctuation mark of salty hush. The gulls overhead cheered, their cries turning into applause for the newest linguist of the deep. By the time the moon blinked awake, she could argue with a whirlpool and win. Playful dolphins gathered, their sleek bodies bouncing like rubber balls in a pool party. She tossed a kelp strand, and the dolphins caught it with choreography that would make a Broadway troupe jealous. Their clicks formed a jaunty serenade, and she responded by weaving ribbons of foam that spelled out jokes only sea creatures could get. One particularly cheeky dolphin tried to steal her glimmering pearl necklace, only to slip on a slick shell and splatter sea spray across the moonlit water. The whole scene resembled a slapstick scene from a cartoon, except the audience was a school of bewildered sea cucumbers. With each flirtatious ripple, she sensed a new power blossoming, the magnetic pull of a lure that could make rocks blush and storms sigh. She flicked a strand of hair, and a shy seaweed twirled toward the surface as if drawn by an invisible spotlight. The irony was delicious. A goddess born from wasteful foam now commanded desire better than any mortal influencer on Instagram. Her laughter, bright, tinkling, like crystal chandeliers underwater, sent shivers through the coral reefs, making them glow in embarrassed pink. It dawned on her that beauty wasn't just a pretty face. It was a weapon, a passport, and a secret password all at once. As the tide turned, she stepped onto a rock, feeling the cool sting of sand scratching her bare feet like a daring reality show challenge. The horizon blazed, promising lands where mortals would worship her name, and poets would scramble for verses about her shimmering entrance. She winked at the distant cliffs, recalling a line from an ancient comedy. If you think this is a splash, wait till the gossip hits the mainland. The sea roared approval, sending a spray that smelled of ozone and freshly cut gossip. And so, the dawn of beauty began, a ripple that would soon become a tsunami of enchantment across the world. When the waves crashed against the island of Cyprus, a frothy surge rose like a glittering curtain spilling from the severed genitals of Uranus. From that shimmering foam, the goddess Aphrodite stepped, her skin glistening with seawater droplets that smelled of brine and blooming sea lavender. She breathed in the salty air, her hair cascading like a sunrise of gold-colored kelp, and the gulls shrieked overhead as if announcing a new celebrity. Even the rocks seemed to blush under her gaze, pulsing with a heat that turned the tide into a warm caress. Thus was born the goddess of love, a living postcard that would soon turn Olympus into a reality TV drama. Word of her breathtaking arrival spread faster than a rumor about a mortal's secret Instagram account. Soon the Olympians gathered in the marble hall, their thunderous applause echoing like a stadium chant. Aphrodite's radiant presence made the air thicken with perfume, a heady mix of rose, honey, and the faint hint of sandalwood, enough to make even stoic Zeus sniff. The goddess's beauty sparked a fierce contest, as each deity sharpened their wits like swords to claim the title of the fairest. Little did they know the prize would cost them more than a few bruised egos. It would unleash love, betrayal, and a war that would later be streamed as the Trojan saga. Hera, queen of the heavens, strutted forward, draped in a peacock-feathered gown that glittered like a fireworks display at a royal wedding. She boasted of her regal poise and motherly wisdom, sprinkling jokes about how even Zeus couldn't ignore her Wi-Fi strength aura. Athena, armored in polished bronze, marched in with a fierce stare, her helmet reflecting the flicker of oil lamps as if she were the original strategic gamer. She argued that intellect and martial prowess outranked any mere pretty face, wielding a spear that sparked like a neon sign reading "Brains over Beauty." Finally, Aphrodite swirled in, tossing a rose-laden bouquet that burst with a scent so intoxicating it made the gods' stomachs knot like a roller coaster before a drop. To settle the showdown, the gods appointed Paris, a shepherd prince with a reputation for being as indecisive as a GPS with a dead battery. The young Trojan was led to a sun-splashed meadow where golden apples glittered like tempting emojis awaiting a swipe right. Each goddess presented her bribe. Hera offered power, promising Paris a throne that would make even Netflix's throne room look modest. Athena offered wisdom, a mind sharp enough to outwit any mortal, promising his descendants would invent the first ever smartphone, if only metaphorically. Aphrodite, however, slipped a love-laced sigh into his ear, whispering of a mortal woman whose beauty could outshine the sun and whose name would be carved into history forever. Paris, swayed by the sweet perfume of desire, crowned Aphrodite with the golden apple, shouting, "She's the fairest," as if announcing the winner of a karaoke contest. The goddess grinned, her laughter ringing like crystal chimes, and vanished into a ripple of sea foam that smelled of citrus and mischief. With the apple in her hand, Aphrodite set into motion a chain of events that turned love into a battlefield, where mortals fought like teenagers at a high school dance. Soon, Helen of Sparta would be whisked away, sparking the Trojan War that lasted a decade and gave us countless movies, memes, and a timeless cautionary tale about judging beauty contests. Thus, the contest of the gods sealed Aphrodite's fate as the irresistible catalyst of love and war, reminding us that even divine beauty can be a double-edged sword, glittering, glorious, and occasionally gloriously messy. When the foam of the Aegean churned into a frothy whirl, it birthed Aphrodite like a celestial soap commercial, her skin glistening with salty spray and sunrise pink. The scent of seaweed and brine clung to her hair, and gulls cackled as if they'd just witnessed the universe's most dramatic reveal. She rose, dripping droplets that hissed on the rocky shore, each bead a tiny mirror reflecting Olympus's distant marble. The ocean roared a laugh, saying, "Welcome, love. You finally decided to make a splash." The gods perched on their ivory thrones, eyebrows raised like an audience at a surprise cameo, and welcomed her onto Olympus with a chorus louder than a stadium chant. Zeus tossed a thunderbolt like a party popper, while Hera offered a bouquet of ambrosial roses that smelled like sweet incense and a hint of gossip. Aphrodite strutted across the marble promenade, her steps ticking like a runway, each stride scattering rose petals that tingled the air with perfume and mischief. Even the stoic Athena cracked a smile, muttering that love might finally be the only thing to make the gods sweat. Soon, mortals felt her whisper like a soft jazz saxophone slipping into a night market, stirring passions hotter than a summer barbecue. Lovers in Sparta suddenly blushed brighter than a freshly painted shield, their hearts thumping like war drums in sync with the rhythm of desire. She handed them a spark of longing that felt like a perfect meme, instant, shareable, and impossible to ignore. And when a shy shepherd whispered a love poem, the wind carried it across hills, turning the simple verses into a viral love song that even the moon stopped to hum. Heroes marched into battle with Aphrodite's blessing, their swords gleaming like heartbeats, while her scent, sweet as honey-dripping figs, clung to their armor. Odysseus, ever the smooth talker, used a kiss as a tactical distraction, leaving foes dazed as if they'd just watched a cat video on a cursed scroll. Even Achilles, famed for his invincibility, found his heel softening under a lover's sigh, reminding him that vulnerability can be more lethal than any spear. The goddess chuckled, noting that love was the ultimate plot twist, turning epic quests into messy, glorious rom-coms. The sea that birthed her never quieted, humming an endless ballad of foam and moonlight, each wave crashing like applause after a flawless performance. Salty breezes carried the faint aroma of roses mixed with kelp, a perfume that reminded sailors of stolen kisses and soggy sandals. As moonbeams danced on the water, the ocean whispered gossip about mortals' love affairs, its voice rough as a bartender's, but sweet as a dessert. In that perpetual chorus, Aphrodite's grace floated forever, a glittering reminder that even the deepest tides are just love-struck hearts in motion. The sea-foam bride, Thetis, glimmered beside Peleus as they celebrated their wedding under a sky streaked with crimson sunsets. Laughter ricocheted off marble columns, while servants hustled trays of honey-dripping figs and smoked lamb, the air thick with perfume and the faint tang of spilled wine. Suddenly, a ripple of gossip turned to gasps when Eris, the goddess of discord, crashed the party uninvited, her sandals scraping against the marble like a rebellious drumbeat. With a theatrical flourish, she hurled a golden apple into the throng, its surface catching the firelight like a tiny sun. The apple bobbed on the marble floor, inscribed with the bold claim to the fairest, and the divine banquet instantly pivoted from merriment to mortal peril. The golden fruit glimmered, catching the eyes of every deity like a celebrity selfie gone viral. Hera, queen of the heavens, arched an eyebrow, her perfume of myrrh mingling with iron-sharp ambition as she claimed the apple as her birthright. Athena, armored in wisdom and the smell of fresh olives, countered with the cool logic of a courtroom drama, declaring that strategic brilliance made her the true beauty. Aphrodite, dripping with rose-scented allure and the faint sigh of sea salt, snapped back, arguing that love itself crowned her the fairest. The banquet erupted into a chorus of snide remarks, clinking goblets, and the occasional thunderclap of ego, turning the feast into an ancient version of a reality show showdown. The three goddesses began a heated debate, their voices rising like surf on a stormy shore, each trying to outshout the other, while the mortals below squirmed in their togas. Hera threatened to unleash a torrent of plagues. Athena brandished her spear of intellect, and Aphrodite whispered promises of irresistible charm that could make even a stoned statue blush. The air grew heavy with the scent of burning incense, the metallic tang of Zeus's distant lightning, and the uneasy feeling that someone was about to lose a divine eyebrow. Even the tablecloths seemed to quiver, as if fearing they might be trampled by celestial drama. In the middle of this celestial squabble, a messenger was summoned, delivering a decree that the decision must fall to a mortal, someone pure enough to judge the beauty contest, yet clueless enough to be easily swayed. Enter Paris, a lanky prince of Troy, strolling through the garden of his palace with a basket of figs and a mind preoccupied with the upcoming war of fashion. He smelled the sweet rot of overripe grapes and the sharp tang of sea spray, his sandals kicking up dust as he ambled toward the Olympus garden, blissfully unaware of the divine drama awaiting him. When the golden apple glinted before his eyes, the goddess of love brushed a kiss of perfume across his cheek, whispering that choosing her would bring Sparta's most coveted woman to his bedside. Athena offered him wisdom wrapped in the scent of fresh parchment, while Hera promised power and a throne as solid as the mountain's core. Paris, caught between the smells of power, wisdom, and sheer temptation, felt his heart race like a chariot on a racetrack, the weight of the world suddenly perched on his unsuspecting shoulders. With a hesitant grin, Paris lifted the apple, his fingers slick with the sweat of indecision, and declared Aphrodite the winner, sealing his fate with a decision as sticky as honey-dripping figs. The gods erupted in a chorus of jubilant howls and bitter curses, the garden echoing with the clash of thunder and the soft rustle of silk as Aphrodite swirled away, draped in rose-perfumed victory. The spark of discord ignited a chain reaction that would soon see Trojan walls crumble and poets compose verses about love-induced ruin. As the sun set, casting amber shadows over the marble, the banquet's remnants, spilled wine, broken plates, and a lone golden apple, lay like a cautionary breadcrumb for future mortal courts. And thus, the tale of the apple of discord began, a story as timeless as a meme that never dies, reminding us that even gods can't resist a good drama. When Zeus tossed his divine gauntlet onto Paris's shoulders, the young Trojan prince swaggered out of the city gates as if he were on a royal red carpet. A hawk swooped low, its shadow skittering across the marble steps like a paparazzo chasing a celebrity. Hermes, the fleet-footed messenger with winged sandals, appeared in a flash of bronze and whispered, "Take the road less cursed, kid. Avoid the goat herders and the potholes of destiny." The air smelled of sea salt and burnt incense, a reminder that even gods love a good aromatherapy session. Paris chuckled, tightening his cloak, and set off toward Sparta, unaware that his journey was about to become an ancient road trip reality show. The road to Sparta wound through pine-scented valleys where cicadas sang like a broken choir, and the occasional goat bleated an offbeat chorus that could make a modern pop star cringe. Dust rose in clouds as Paris's horse kicked up grit that stung his eyes, making him feel like he'd been forced to watch an epic battle on a 90-minute Netflix binge without the popcorn. He passed a shrine where a bronze statue of Athena wept oil, the scent of melted metal mixing with the earthy odor of wet soil after a sudden downpour. A sudden thunderclap cracked the sky, as if Zeus himself had dropped the bass at an Olympus-level concert. Yet Paris pressed on, his heart thumping like a drumline in a stadium, each step echoing the drumbeat of fate. Back in Sparta, King Menelaus paced the marble courtyard, polishing his spear until it shone brighter than a Hollywood car commercial. Servants flustered about, carrying platters of honey-glazed figs that smelled like sweet victory, while the court musicians tuned lyres that squeaked like badly tuned electric guitars. Menelaus rehearsed his greeting, unaware that the real guest would be a lover boy from Troy, not a diplomatic envoy. The palace walls were draped in tapestries depicting heroic hunts, their woolly texture whispering stories of blood and triumph to anyone who brushed against them. Ironically, the king's most pressing concern was how to seat his guests comfortably, as if arranging furniture could stave off the impending apocalypse. The Spartan women, braided like the cables of a vintage video game controller, stirred pots of stew that hissed and splattered, filling the hall with the aroma of garlic and roasted lamb, a scent that could make a Spartan warrior weep with nostalgia. Menelaus joked with his advisor, "If Paris brings a gift, I hope it's not another cursed apple." We already have enough drama for a season of Game of Thrones. Laughter echoed off the stone columns, but a cold draft slipped in, carrying the faint perfume of a goddess and the metallic tang of impending war. The torches flickered, casting shadows that danced like CGI effects on an old theater screen, making the courtiers glance nervously at each other. Yet the king remained blissfully ignorant, his mind busy planning the banquet menu, not the fate of nations. As twilight smeared the horizon with bruised purples, Paris arrived at Sparta's gates, his sandals slapping the stone in a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like a marching band. The city's guards stared at him, half expecting a celebrity cameo, half fearing a Trojan horse. Yes, even ancient Greeks loved a good pun. Hermes reappeared, winking, and tossed a golden apple into the courtyard, its surface glinting like a Snapchat filter for deities. The apple's scent, equal parts sweet honey and raw ambition, bubbled through the air, making even the strongest Spartan muscles twitch with anticipation. Unbeknownst to Menelaus and his court, that shiny fruit would soon spark a quarrel among the gods that would rock mortal history harder than a Hollywood blockbuster's final showdown. In the vaulted hall of Menelaus's palace, sun-baked marble glittered beneath a canopy of silk banners, while the air reeked of spiced wine and charred goat skins. An aromatic punch that could wake a dead hero. Paris, lanky and restless, paced over mosaics depicting battle scenes, his sandal-clad feet echoing like a drum solo at a rock concert. Suddenly, a swirl of golden mist coalesced into a goddess, each more dazzling than the last, and the young prince felt his heartbeat jump to a pop song tempo. The gods weren't here for small talk. They were armed with offers that glittered brighter than a Trojan's lute. He stared, caught between awe and the faint, gritty taste of fear on his tongue. First stepped Hera, queen of the heavens, draped in a cloak that shivered with the sound of distant thunder, her eyes flashing like a corporate CEO's laser focus. She dangled a promise of unrivaled power, ruling over men, gods, and even the fickle fate of a sandal-selling merchant. Imagine, she purred, a crown that never tarnishes, a throne that whispers your name in every wind. The palace chandeliers flickered, casting shadows that danced like a rave, and a stray mouse scurried across the marble, startling Paris with its squeak. Yet the taste of raw ambition lingered, sweet and slightly metallic, like fresh blood on a sword blade. Athena marched forward, armor clinking like a metronome, her helmet polished to a mirror shine that reflected the whole hall, essentially a portable selfie stick for warlords. She offered wisdom and battlefield victory, promising strategies sharper than a chef's knife, and ideas that could outwit a scheming sphinx. Think of every chess grandmaster on Game of Thrones, combined with the brainy charm of a wizard at a tech startup, she declared, tossing a gleaming spear that sang as it sliced through the air. The scent of pine and iron mingled, a crisp reminder of training grounds and the iron taste of resolve. Paris felt his mind stretch, as if he were trying on a new pair of sandals that were, oddly, made of pure intellect. Aphrodite floated in on a cloud of rose-scented perfume, her hair cascading like a waterfall of silk, and every heartbeat in the hall seemed to sync with a love song on repeat. She whispered of Helen, the most beautiful mortal woman whose smile could melt marble and whose name sounded like a secret password for the gods. Shash, she's the ultimate swipe right, she giggled, flashing a grin that could outshine a million sunrise selfies. The air thickened with sweet nectar, mingling with the faint, lingering musk of incense and the subtle, uncomfortable squelch of old olives left to rot in the pantry. Paris's pulse raced, a mix of teenage crush and the dread of a reality show finale. Caught in a divine tug-of-war, Paris stared at the trio, each offering a glittering carrot that dangled just out of reach. He felt the weight of 1,000 myths pressing on his shoulders, like trying to carry an ancient pizza oven on a flimsy tricycle. The hall seemed to pulse, the torches now flickering in sync with his rapid breathing, while outside, distant waves crashed like an audience applause. With a wry grin and a sigh that sounded like a sitcom laugh track, he muttered, "Well, if I'm going to pick, I might as well make it an epic sequel." The gods, amused and solemn, waited, their promises hanging in the smoky air like a plot twist waiting to be revealed. On a sun-baked hill at the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, stood like divas fighting for the last golden apple, its surface glinting like a disco ball in the Aegean light. The crowd of mortal and divine onlookers smelled incense, roasted lamb, and the sharp tang of ambition. Zeus, ever the weary referee, tossed the apple onto a marble altar and declared a contest to settle the dispute. Paris, a lanky shepherd prince with a nose for mischief, was summoned to judge, his heart thumping like a war drum in his chest. Little did he know that his verdict would set off a chain reaction louder than a rock concert encore. When the goddesses each whispered their bribe, Aphrodite's promise cut through the air like a siren song. "I will give you the most beautiful woman alive." She painted a vivid picture of Helen's golden hair swaying in a Trojan breeze, the perfume of her perfume, and a future of love that could rival any Hollywood romance. Paris, eyes wide as saucers, imagined the feel of silk against his skin and the soft sighs of a queen, and his mind danced to a tune only Aphrodite could conduct. He lifted the golden apple, its weight warm against his palm, and placed it at her feet while the chorus of gulls cried overhead. In that moment, the gods' laughter sounded like a backstage rumble, masking the storm about to brew. Hera's eyebrows shot up like thunderheads, and Athena's gaze sharpened into a spear of steel, both fuming like a kitchen left on high heat. Hera spat a curse that would haunt Paris, promising never-ending shame and a war that would scar his lineage. The words tasted of bitter wine and iron. Athena, ever the strategist, vowed to side with the Greeks, swapping her wisdom for the cunning of mortal generals, her presence humming like a war drum echo in the night. The air thickened with the scent of ozone and impending conflict as the heavens cracked with discontent. Paris, blissfully unaware of the divine fallout, strutted away with the apple, his sandals slapping the dusty road like an unwitting rock star. True to her bargain, Aphrodite whisked Paris across the sparkling Ionian Sea to Sparta, where Helen lounged on a marble couch, sipping wine that smelled like figs and fire. Paris, cheeks flush with daring, seized her hand in a drama more dramatic than any Netflix binge watch, and the two vanished into a carriage of mythic proportions. The theft sent shockwaves through the city. Women gasped, men shouted, and a chorus of angry goats bleated in the distance, their cries mingling with the clatter of armor being forged. Helen's departure left a trail of rose petals and broken hearts, while the Trojan shoreline echoed with the salty spray of waves and the metallic clang of swords being readied. The gods, already sipping ambrosia, raised their goblets, smirking at the absurdity that a love apple could ignite a saga worthy of a blockbuster sequel. Within a few months, the Trojan War erupted, a whirlwind of spears, shouts, and the acrid smell of burning wood that clung to every battlefield like a stubborn perfume. Gods leapt in and out of the chaos, Hera hurling bolts, Athena whispering tactics to Greek commanders, and Aphrodite sighing over the lovers she'd set loose. The war dragged on for a decade, turning heroes into myths and ordinary soldiers into legends, all because a prince chose the prettiest promise over the most strategic one. Ironically, the golden apple that was supposed to bring love ended up serving as a cosmic invitation to a reality TV-style showdown of gods and mortals. When the dust finally settled, the scarred hills of Troy whispered a warning. Never trust a deal that smells too sweet. For 10 relentless years, the Aegean thundered with clash of steel and cries of the wounded, as Greeks and Trojans turned the plain of Scamander into a muddy battlefield carpeted with broken shields. Dawn smelled of salt and sweat, while night drummed with the hoarse howl of wounded warriors begging the gods for a quiet moment. Each sunrise spilled fire red over the city walls, a reminder that even the most polished bronze could not stop the creeping dread. The Greeks, like a squad of over-caffeinated reality TV contestants, swapped stories of heroics over wine that tasted of ash and cheap oregano. Yet beneath the bravado, a collective sigh rose, an ancient echo of, why did we even start this? When the Greeks finally breached Troy's towering gates, the city erupted in a symphony of crackling flames and the sickening squelch of collapsing stone. Charred timber hissed as it met the night sky, sending a plume of black soot that tasted like burnt leather to every nostril within miles. Women screamed, their voices tangled with the clatter of panicked feet and the clang of bronze swords striking wooden beams. Amid the chaos, a lone horse, Trojan, wooden, and terribly misunderstood, stumbled, its painted eyes glinting like a meme-ready gif of doom. By morning, Troy lay in ruins, a smoldering ruin that whispered, "We built an empire on a pretty apple, and now we're toast." Paris, the handsome prince who once tossed an apple and sparked this catastrophe, met his end not with a heroic spear, but with a cursed arrow nicknamed Boom, that flew straight from the bow of Philoctetes. The arrow sang through the air, its whistling sound reminiscent of a bad karaoke note, and pierced his shoulder with a thud that rattled the very bones of his once gleaming armor. Blood sprayed like crimson fireworks, staining the marble steps where he once strutted like a Greek god runway model. As he fell, the scent of iron mingled with the lingering perfume of blooming roses, a cruel reminder of his earlier flirtation with Aphrodite. The mortals around him whispered, half joking, "Guess the apple didn't pay his medical bills." The golden apple, that shiny troublemaker, didn't stay buried in the wreckage. Instead, it floated up on a gust of divine wind, glittering like a celebrity's Instagram filter. Zeus, bored and slightly irritated, tossed it back to the heavens, where Hera promptly stuck it on a celestial billboard, advertising pride, 0, consequence, 100. The gods chuckled, their laughter rolling like distant thunder, while Athena rolled her eyes and muttered about needing better HR policies for mortal disputes. Even Hermes, ever the messenger, delivered a note to Olympus reading, "Return policy expired, sorry." The apple's journey became a cosmic punchline, reminding everyone that some fruits just don't belong in fruit bowls. So, the tale of the judgment of Paris lives on, handed down like a badly edited TikTok saga, warning us that a trivial choice can unleash a decade of drama worthy of any binge-watch marathon. Pride strutted into the story like a swaggering pop star, only to be humbled by the heavy base of war and the sour aftertaste of betrayal. The lingering smell of burnt wood and spilled wine still drifts through classrooms and movie screens, a sensory reminder that myths are more than pretty pictures. They're gritty, ugly, and oddly relatable. When you next stare at a shiny apple at a market, remember Paris's slip-up and ask yourself, am I about to start a war or just buy a snack? In the end, the legacy of Troy is less about heroes and more about the humbling power of a single, seemingly innocent judgment. The sea foam still clung to the marble steps of Peleus's palace when the wedding bells rang, and a tidal wave of guests flooded the hall. Musicians hammered lyres while bakers coaxed honeyed figs into caramel, sending sweet, buttery fog through the columns. Peleus, a tall, bearded hero, wiped sweat from his brow with a goatskin napkin, while Thetis, her hair shimmering like sunrise on water, glimmered in a gown of woven pearls. Laughter roared like surf crashing on cliffs, and even the marble statues seemed to grin, their stone faces lit by torchlight. In that raucous tableau, destiny brewed a heady mix of love, wine, and lingering incense. Just as the revelry peaked, a shadow slipped through the tapestry-draped doorway. Eris, the goddess of discord, looking like a rock star with a bad attitude and a mischievous grin. She tossed a gleaming golden apple onto the banquet table, its surface catching firelight and spelling out, "To the fairest," in letters that shone like neon. The apple clanged against bronze plates, sending a chorus of startled gasps and a few nervous chuckles from the older gods, who were more used to peace treaties than petty squabbles. Eris vanished as quickly as she'd arrived, leaving behind a buzzing tension that smelled faintly of ozone and spilled wine. The guests, half drunk, half intrigued, stared at the apple as if it were a mysterious TikTok trend they just couldn't decode. Hera, queen of the heavens, strutted forward, her robes swishing like a royal velvet cape, and declared, "I am the fairest, for I keep the heavens in order and the gods from running amok." Athena, helmet polished to a mirror shine, tapped her spear and retorted, "Wisdom and war make a woman supreme. I've taught mortals to build cities and conquer enemies." Then Aphrodite rose, perfume of rose petals and sea salt trailing behind her, and whispered, "Love is the true power. Look at those blushing mortals. They'd die for a kiss." Their voices rose like a chorus of thunder, each claim echoing off the marble walls, while the banquet's drunken slaves whispered about the absurdity of divine beauty contests. The tension crackled like static before a storm, each goddess flexing a divine ego that could shatter a mortal heart. To settle the quarrel, Zeus, the ultimate referee with a beard that could hide a small village, appointed a mortal judge, Paris, a handsome prince with a reputation for scrolling through the latest scrolls of gossip. He was handed the golden apple, its weight warm as a fresh-baked loaf, and told to pick the fairest, a decision that felt like choosing a favorite pizza topping at a symposium. Paris inspected each goddess. Hera offered a throne of clouds, Athena a gleaming shield, and Aphrodite, with a wink, promised the most beautiful mortal woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. The prince's eyes widened, his pulse thumping like war drums, and he whispered, "I'm going to need a bigger epic for this." The crowd gasped, wine splashing onto the floor, as the fate of an entire continent began to hinge on a single, love-driven, Instagram-style post-mortem. The apple's bite set off a chain reaction that would later be known as the Trojan War. But at the moment, it was just a bitter seed of discord sprouting in a garden of merriment. The gods strutted away, each clutching their own prize, while mortals whispered about the absurdity of a war ignited by vanity and a love contract. The banquet hall, now littered with broken amphorae and spilled wine, smelled of copper and burnt incense, a sensory reminder that even the gods love a good drama. As the night faded, the stars above seemed to twinkle like paparazzi flashes, foreshadowing the saga that would be sung by bards for centuries. And somewhere, Eris laughed, her grin as sharp as the apple's bite, knowing she'd turned a wedding into the most epic reality TV show the ancient world ever saw. High above the smoky cliffs of Olympus, Aphrodite lounged on her rose-studded throne, the scent of jasmine and crushed figs curling around her like an invisible veil. She listened as Paris, the reluctant prince critic, declared that she, not Hera or Athena, most deserved the prize of mortal adoration. With a mischievous grin, she whispered a promise that could fry the eyes of a sunset. The most beautiful woman alive, Helen of Sparta, would be his for the taking. Her words dripped like honey, and the golden goblet of ambrosia trembled in the hand of the cupbearer, reflecting the glow of a sun that hadn't yet risen on Troy. Little did the gods know that this divine flirtation would stitch together desire and ambition tighter than a warrior's leather straps. Paris stared at the shimmering marble of the council hall, his mind buzzing like a bee trapped in a sandal. The idea of stealing Helen felt like swiping right on a goddess-level Instagram influencer. Dangerous, dazzling, and guaranteed to cause a mess. He could already taste the salty tang of the Aegean on his lips. Imagine her ivory skin brushed by the wind, and hear the soft sighs of spiced wine at a banquet. Aphrodite's promise throbbed in his chest like a drum, each beat echoing against the iron armor of his ambitions. He clenched his fist, feeling the leather of his gauntlet scrape his skin, and whispered, a daring why not, that would soon roar across the plains of Troy. Up on Olympus, the other deities snorted as Aphrodite sealed the deal, their laughter crackling louder than Zeus's thunderclap. Athena, ever the strategist, muttered that love was a weapon sharper than any spear, while Hera rolled her eyes, muttering about Paris's taste in women being as poor as his fashion sense. Hermes, the winged courier, zipped down with a love letter tied to his sandal, the parchment smelling of sea salt and burnt incense, delivering Aphrodite's flirtatious contract to the mortal world. The mortals below heard the low hum of destiny humming like a distant lyre, each note tinged with the metallic scent of blood, ready to spill. In the flicker of torchlight, the promise glimmered like a neon sign reading romance. 0, war, 100. A cheeky warning the gods seemed to enjoy. When the Trojan envoys reached Sparta, the air smelled of smoke-cured pork and brine, a heady mix that made the palace gates feel like a sauna for warlords. Helen, poised like a marble statue but with a mischievous sparkle in her eyes, laughed at the idea of being a pawn, her silk gown rustling like gossip in the wind. Paris, heart pounding louder than a war drum, slipped a golden token into her palm, the metal warm as a fresh coffee mug, sealing a bargain that tasted both sweet and sour. The night erupted with the clamor of torches snapping, the distant roar of surf, and the soft, uneasy chuckle of the gods as they watched a love story turn into a high-stakes reality TV drama. Soon after, a fleet of ships loaded with armor that smelled of oil and sweat would set sail, each oar splashing like a beat in a booming soundtrack. Warships on the horizon, signaling the start of a conflict that would echo through centuries. Aphrodite's promise, wrapped in perfume and peril, ignited a chain reaction that turned the gentle lullaby of the Aegean into a relentless roar of steel and spears. Troopers marched, their helmets clanged like cymbals, while distant hills soaked up the acrid perfume of burning ships, the scent lingering like an angry perfume ad. Even now, scholars whisper that the war was less about Helen's beauty than about a goddess's cheeky swipe right on destiny. Yet every time a lover sighs for an impossible romance, they unknowingly echo Paris's reckless "why not" that set the world ablaze. So the next time you hear a love song on a battlefield playlist, remember, Aphrodite's Promise is the original mixtape that started it all, and the gods are still scrolling through the comments, smirking. When the gods gathered on Mount Olympus for a banquet that smelled of ambrosia and burnt incense, Zeus tossed a golden apple into the mortal realm as a prankster's prize. The apple bore the inscription for the fairest, a cheeky tagline that would set off a beauty pageant that the Greeks never signed up for. 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, stormed the palace of Sparta, each wielding arguments sharper than a Spartan spear. Paris, a prince with a reputation for choosing the comfiest couch over battle, was summoned to judge the contest, his heart beating like a drum on a warship's deck. Little did he know that the apple was a loaded weapon, glinting like a Hollywood Oscar for a lead role in a tragedy. When Aphrodite whispered promises of the most beautiful woman in the world, Paris felt his brain short-circuit like a busted iPhone, and he snatched the apple without a second thought. He handed the gleaming fruit to Aphrodite, sealing his fate faster than a Netflix binge seals a weekend. The goddess giggled, her laughter echoing like the splash of wine against marble, and vanished into a cloud of rose-scented perfume. Meanwhile, Hera hurled thunderbolts at the ceiling, muttering that she'd be the one to write the sequel. The Greeks get revenge. Paris, now officially a love tunnel-visioned puppet, walked away with a swagger that smelled faintly of sandalwood and impending doom. Back on the shores of Troy, Agamemnon rallied the Greek fleet, his voice booming over the clamor of oars and the stench of salty seaweed that clung to every warrior's armor. He raised a massive shield emblazoned with a golden eagle, its feathers ruffling in the salty wind like a blockbuster movie poster in a hurricane. Spearmen tightened their grips on spears that glinted like kitchen knives, while the cooks cursed the smoky smell of burnt meat wafting from the mess tents. The Greeks cheered, drums thumping like a bass line in a rock concert, while a stray goat bleated in the background, adding an oddly comic soundtrack to the looming carnage. Even the seagulls seemed to gossip, squawking about the inevitable clash as if they'd seen a spoiler on TikTok. Aphrodite, who prefers subtlety over fireworks, slipped through the night in a veil of jasmine and mischief, her footsteps as silent as a cat burglar in a marble hallway. She brushed a kiss of enchantment onto Helen's cheek, making the Trojan queen's hair curl like a sunrise over the Aegean, and her smile sharper than a sword's edge. When the Trojans marched, their shields reflected the soft glow of moonlit roses, and the scent of love hung heavier than the iron of their armor. Even the war-torn battlements seemed to sigh, the stone walls warm with the heat of passion and the occasional grunt of a broken spear. In the chaos, Aphrodite's influence was a backstage director, pulling heartstrings that tangled both lovers and soldiers alike. The irony of a love goddess fueling a war tasted as bitter as the burnt olives that littered the Greek camp's trash heap. Yet the Greeks pressed on, their horns blaring like a rebellious subway announcer, while Trojan youths whispered about destiny, like teenagers scrolling through memes of doomed heroes. Aphrodite watched from her celestial balcony, sipping ambrosial wine and smirking as if she'd just binge-watched a reality show called Survivor, Iliad Edition. In the end, the golden apple rolled into the annals of myth, its gleam forever a reminder that a single fruit can launch 1,000 ships and 1,000,000 drama episodes. And so a duel of gods and mortals continued, each side playing their part on a stage where love and war tangoed like a pair of wildly out-of-sync dancers. The moon hung like a silver coin over Troy's marble walls, and Aphrodite lounged on a fluffy cloud, sipping ambrosia as if it were a cosmopolitan cocktail. She kept one eye on Paris, the handsome prince who'd stolen Helen for a golden apple, and the other on the trembling lovers whispering beneath the city's rooftops. The goddess flicked a golden strand of hair, sending a soft gust that brushed Paris's cheek and whispered, "Don't worry, babe. I've got your back." Below, the Greeks huddled on the beaches, their shields clanging like cheap metal cans, while the Trojans sang mournful odes that smelled of incense and sea salt. With a mischievous grin, Aphrodite muttered, "Let's see how you handle a war when romance is the real weapon." And the heavens trembled with anticipation. As spears splintered and armor scraped, Aphrodite slipped into the fray, her veil shimmering like glitter on a pop star's stage. She brushed a stray arrow off Paris's shoulder, the metal clattering onto sand with a sound like broken glass in a quiet bar. When a furious Achaean warrior lunged at the Trojan king, the goddess tossed a rose-petaled cloud that confused him, making him stumble like a drunk NPC in a video game. The scent of rose oil mingled with the coppery tang of blood, while the distant clang of bronze echoed like a heavy metal riff. Yet, every time Paris raised his sword, Aphrodite whispered a honeyed lullaby, steering his blows toward the enemy's helmets and away from his own comrades. After weeks of sweaty combat, the Greeks grew tired of trench-style warfare and cooked up a plan as sneaky as a cat meme. They carved a massive wooden horse, its grain smelling like pine sap and stale beer, and left it on Troy's shore as a gift wrapped in false humility. Aphrodite watched the Greeks haul the beast inland, her laughter bubbling like a spring bottle of soda, while she painted the night with moonlight that made the horse's eyes glint like LED screens. Inside the hollow belly, sleepy soldiers snored, their breath mixing with the musty wood, while outside, Trojan guards debated whether to bring it inside or toss it into the sea. Aphrodite nudged a gentle wind that swayed the horse's tail, as if saying, "Trust the plot twist, kids." And the city's people, intoxicated by curiosity, rolled the wooden animal through their gates. The horse settled in the courtyard, its massive hooves thudding against stone like a drumbeat at a rock concert. Inside, the hidden Greeks smelled the sweet aroma of Aphrodite's lingering perfume, a reminder that even enemies could get a whiff of romance. As night deepened, the city's torches hissed, sending orange sparks that danced over marble columns, while distant oars creaked as Greek ships waited like impatient fans outside a stadium. Aphrodite hovered above the walls, watching the Trojans celebrate the gift, their laughter mingling with the distant rumble of a storm that smelled of wet earth and petrichor. She raised an eyebrow, thinking how absurd it was that a wooden statue could bring down a civilization, then sighed, "Well, I always said love could move mountains, or at least walls." At dawn, the hidden Greeks burst from the horse's belly, shouting battle cries that cracked the air like a bass drop in a club. Swords sang as they sliced through the unsuspecting guards, splattering the marble steps with a mixture of blood, sweat, and the pungent scent of fear. The city's great walls trembled, bricks crumbling like stale cookies under a heavy foot, and a cascade of dust rose, turning the sky a murky amber. From her lofty perch, Aphrodite watched the chaos, a wry smile curling her lips as she whispered, "Guess you could say I really broke their hearts?" As Troy fell, the goddess floated away on a breeze scented with ash and roses, leaving behind a ruined city that smelled of burnt timber, molten metal, and the faint echo of a love story gone tragically epic. When the sun slipped behind the smoke-crowned walls of Troy, the goddess of love found herself perched on a shattered marble dais, sipping bitter honey wine. The air tasted of charred olive oil and the metallic sting of spilled blood, a perfume Aphrodite never bargained for when she first slipped a golden apple into the mortal realm. She stared at Helen's empty bed, where a silken sheet still clung to the ghost of a perfume bottle, its scent now a reminder of desire turned disaster. In that flickering twilight, the goddess's sigh sounded like a lyre out of tune, as if the universe itself had misplaced its sheet music. Aphrodite's mind drifted like a gull over the Aegean, replaying the moment Paris, with a wink, slipped the fabled apple into her hand, an apple that tasted oddly like a forbidden cheeseburger. She laughed, a sound that cracked the marble columns, realizing that beauty had become the ultimate Trojan horse, delivering not just a pretty face, but a full-blown cataclysm. The clamor of swords clanged against bronze shields, but she heard the softer, more insidious clang of egos colliding, each clash echoing the hollow ache of unrequited love. Even the gods on Olympus rolled their eyes, as if watching a reality TV showdown where the prize was a ruined city and a broken heart, now with Helen gone. Her silvery hair tangled in the wreckage like seaweed on a shipwrecked deck. Aphrodite felt the sting of regret seep into her divine veins. She recalled the sweet sighs of lovers in gardens, the warm glow of candlelit embraces, and wondered if those moments were worth the smell of burnt flesh that still clung to her robes. The goddess brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek, only to find it stained with specks of ash, as if the war had painted her very essence with grime. In that gritty tableau, she realized the cost of beauty, a price tag measured not in gold, but in the raw, gritty, gut-wrenching ache of loss. From the ruins, a chorus of mournful lyres rose, and Aphrodite, ever the dramatist, took a theatrical bow, acknowledging her role in the drama as both muse and mischief-maker. She whispered to the wind, "If love is a battlefield, then I'm the cheeky general who forgot to issue helmets." The wind carried her words across the shattered streets, where broken helmets lay like dented soda cans, and the scent of fresh roses fought a losing battle against the lingering odor of burnt wool. The gods, half amused and half groaning, noted that even eternity could use a good comedy of errors now and then. As the night deepened, Aphrodite slipped away, leaving behind a legacy that would flicker in future myths like a soft-glow screensaver on a smartphone, endless, irresistible, and slightly addictive. She promised herself that the next time mortals begged for a love potion, she'd add a dash of irony, maybe a splash of popcorn butter, just to keep things crunchy. The ghosts of Troy, still echoing with the clatter of armor and the sigh of a goddess, would forever remember that beauty isn't just a pretty face. It's the messy, noisy soundtrack of desire, war, and a little bit of divine sarcasm. The sun-kissed cliffs of Cythera glittered like 1,000 broken mirrors, and young priestess Lysandra trudged through the salty sand with a basket of figs for the morning offering. Her sandals squeaked on the pebbles as gulls shrieked overhead, diving into the foam like paparazzi on a celebrity's red carpet. Suddenly, a thin veil of sea foam curled and part opened, revealing a hidden grotto that smelled of brine, jasmine, and the unmistakable tang of old fish. Lysandra's heart thumped louder than a drumline at a football game, and she felt the air vibrate with a presence that could make even Zeus blush. She stepped inside, half expecting a mermaid with a karaoke mic, but found something far more divine. From the frothy cauldron emerged Aphrodite herself, her skin glistening as if she'd just stepped out of a giant cosmic bubble bath. The goddess's hair floated like seaweed, scented with rosemary and the sweet rot of sun-warmed grapes, and she laughed. A sound that rippled through the water like a harp on a breeze. Aphrodite brushed a strand of foam against Lysandra's cheek, leaving a lingering taste of salt and honey that made the priestess's lip tremble with desire. The goddess whispered that love, like a stubborn tide, cannot be tamed, yet it can be channeled through rituals and reverence. With a wink that could outshine any modern TikTok star's sparkle filter, she tasked Lysandra with building a sanctuary to anchor that wild affection on the island. Lysandra returned to the village clutching a handful of sea spray and a divine job description that would make a project manager weep with joy. She rallied the fishermen, the olive pressers, and the gossiping market women, promising them that worshipping Aphrodite would bring not only love, but also better catches and sweeter figs. The townsfolk snorted at the idea of a love god demanding a temple, but their curiosity cracked like an egg when a sudden perfume of roses flooded the marketplace, making everyone swoon. Together they dragged stones, hammered chisels, and sang bawdy love songs that echoed off the cliffs, turning the construction site into a chaotic choir of sweat and giggles. By sunset, a crude marble altar rose from the earth, smelling of fresh marble incense and the ever-present perfume of the sea. With the sanctuary erected, Lysandra introduced rites that were part devotion, part drama, and wholly unforgettable. She taught the islanders to toss rose-petaled shells into the surf, while reciting verses that sounded like a love letter to a badly behaved cat. Sweet, sarcastic, and oddly sincere. Couples would bathe in a pool fed by the grotto's foam, feeling the gritty sand between their toes and the slick, briny water on their skin, believing each splash sealed a promise. Festivals erupted with feasts of honey-glazed lamb, wine that tasted of sunrise, and dancing that made the statues of the gods look like stiff Lego pieces. Most importantly, the rituals reminded everyone that desire could be both tender and messy, like a first kiss that ends in a stray piece of seaweed between the teeth. Word of Cythera's love sanctuary spread faster than a gossip chain on a Greek drama, drawing travelers who wanted a taste of Aphrodite's cheeky blessing. Even the Stoic philosophers paused their debates to sip the island's famed foam wine, swearing it turned their logic into poetic prose about hearts and hips. As generations passed, the grotto became a pilgrimage spot where lovers left locks of hair, and skeptics left a single sarcastic comment on a stone tablet. Because why not mix romance with a little humor? Lysandra's legacy endured, her name whispered in the same breath as the goddess she served, proving that even in antiquity, the best worship involved a splash of drama, a dash of irony, and a whole lot of love. And somewhere, on a distant shore, a modern influencer is probably filming a DIY love altar video, completely unaware that they're reenacting a tale older than their Wi-Fi router. Lysandra stood on the sun-kissed sands of Sugnon, her hair fluttering like a banner caught in a sea breeze. She raised her arms and announced the first annual Seafoam Festival, a celebration that had never before been scribbled on a marble tablet. The crowd, a motley mix of sun-baked farmers, nervous maidens, and a curious goat that seemed to think it was invited, buzzed with anticipation. With a grin as bright as the Aegean sun, She whispered that today the goddess Aphrodite herself would taste the offerings of shells, roses, and honey. The worshippers gathered glossy conch shells, each one polished to a shine that would make a mirror jealous, and laid them in a crescent pattern along the shoreline. Rose petals, still drenched in dew, spilled like blushing clouds, their fragrance mingling with the salty tang of the sea, and the sweet, buttery stench of fresh honey drizzled over the sand. Children laughed as they tossed the petals into the surf, watching them float and dissolve in a fizzing foam that looked like the goddess's own laughter. Even the village baker, notorious for his burnt loaves, offered a lump of honey that smelled like burnt caramel, proving that devotion can be deliciously messy. As the sun dipped low, Lysandra sang an ancient hymn that rose and fell like a tidal wave, each note coaxing the sea into a frothy dance. The foam swelled, brightening to a pearly white, and seemed to pulse in time with the chant, as if Aphrodite herself were breathing through the water. A sudden glimmer rose from the crest, and the gathered crowd felt a warm, tingling rush sweep over them, like a lover's caress on a cool evening. Everyone gasped, half convinced that the goddess had smiled, their hearts thudding louder than the distant drums of a nearby festival. Just then, a cloud, more black than a spilled ink pot, burst overhead, and the sky roared like an angry amphitheater audience. Wind snatched the rose petals from the sand, hurling them like angry confetti, while rain hammered the shore in a percussion of splinters and slapstick. The sea turned hostile, churning its foam into a frenzy that threatened to swallow the humble offerings and the terrified goat alike. Lysandra's voice cracked, yet she shouted louder, urging the cultists to hold fast, proving that faith sometimes has to scream over a thunderstorm. Against the gale, the worshippers huddled together, clutching shells like talismans and licking honey off their fingers for courage. The storm finally relented, sighing away as quickly as a pop culture meme fades from TikTok, leaving a calm sea that glistened with residual foam like a silver veil. In the quiet aftermath, Aphrodite's favor shone through a gentle, rosy glow that painted the horizon, confirming that devotion survived even the most theatrical of weather. Lysandra laughed, wiping salty water from her cheek, and declared that the next Seafoam Festival would include a storm insurance clause, just in case the gods like to binge-watch drama. When the salty breeze from Cythera carried whispers of Aphrodite's moonlit rites, the coastal town of Paphos caught the scent like a lover's perfume. Soon after, Athenian ambassadors arrived in sandals, eyes glittering with the promise of divine favor, and the city's marble temples began to hum with competitive fervor. Word spread faster than gossip at a symposium, sparking a fierce rivalry between the whitewashed sanctuary of Paphos and the lofty Acropolis shrine. Both claimed the true image of the goddess. One favored the gentle dove cooing over olive groves, the other insisted on a swan gliding across sapphire seas. The air grew thick with incense, sea salt, and the sharp tang of ambition, as each priesthood prepared to defend its divine portrait like a modern-day superhero franchise. In the grand hall of Paphos, a delegation of Athenian envoys unfurled scrolls depicting Aphrodite descending on a gleaming swan, only to be met with a chorus of angry clucks from Cytherean priests clutching dove-shaped amulets. The dispute escalated faster than a Twitter feud, with each side brandishing marble statues as if they were proof-of-concept prototypes. One Athenian, a lanky fellow named Demetrios, tried to settle the matter by quoting Homer, but the Paphian priestess, thick-eyed and fierce, interrupted with a snarl that smelled of fermented barley and burnt oil. Soon the hall echoed with the clang of bronze cymbals and the squeal of a squeaky toy-like dove perched atop a marble column, an accidental soundtrack that made the audience wonder if the gods themselves were watching a sitcom. The tension hung like wet laundry on a sun-parched roof, stifling, stiff, and ready to snap at any gust of diplomatic nonsense. Enter Lysandra, a clever magistrate from the island of Delos, whose reputation for smoothing rivalries preceded her like a scented oil trail. She arrived with a satchel of honey-sweet figs and a scroll of compromise, offering both temples a shared festival where the dove would deliver love letters while the swan performed a synchronized water dance. Lysandra's voice rose above the murmurs, warm and persuasive, like a hearthfire, urging the ambassadors to imagine a joint celebration that would draw pilgrims from every polis, even the grumbling Spartans who liked a good wine-soaked brawl. Her humor, comparing the feud to a jealous cat fighting over a sunbeam, softened the mood, and even the stern Paphian priest cracked a grin, smelling faintly of roasted lamb. By the time the sun dipped behind the cliffs, a fragile alliance was inked on a scroll scented with myrrh, promising alternating feast days, one for the dove, one for the swan. The newly forged pact, however, felt as delicate as a spider's web draped over a marble pedestal, and any misstep could send it tumbling into the sea. Athenian artisans began carving swan motifs into the temple steps, but they slipped on the oily marble, leaving a slick, fishy scent that made the Paphian priests grimace. Meanwhile, Paphian singers rehearsed hymns that featured the dove cooing over vineyards. Yet one off-key warbler's squawk sounded like a squeaky hamster, prompting an embarrassed chorus of laughter. Lysandra, ever watchful, paced the courtyard with a sandal-clacked rhythm, sprinkling rose petals that stuck to the damp stone and reminded everyone that love, like worship, can be both fragrant and sticky. The spectators, a motley crowd of bakers, soldiers, and curious tourists who smelled of fried fish and incense, whispered that the rivalry might survive longer than the empire's fashion trends, like the occasional flash mob of Zeus fans in togas. When the first joint festival dawned, the sky erupted in a riot of colors. Dove-white ribbons fluttered beside swan-silver banners, while fiddlers played tunes that sounded suspiciously like a modern pop ballad. Pilgrims feasted on honey-glazed figs, salty olives, and wine that tasted like the very nectar of the gods, their laughter mingling with the soft coo of doves and the distant splash of swans cutting through the pond. The rivalry softened into a friendly competition, each temple trying to outshine the other with more elaborate offerings, a bit like rival reality show producers vying for higher ratings. Even the most stubborn ambassadors left with a souvenir, a tiny bronze dove perched on a swan's beak, a reminder that harmony can be forged in the crucible of compromise, even if it smells a little like burnt incense and seaweed. Thus, Lysandra's fragile alliance held, proving that when gods are involved, politics can be as intoxicating, messy, and oddly entertaining as a night at a Greek tavern. Under the blistering noon sun, the high priests of Aphrodite bickered louder than a tavern full of drunken poets, each claiming the right to polish the golden apple that glittered like a Kardashian selfie. The apple, a gift from the goddess herself, had been propped atop the marble altar for weeks, its surface reflecting the azure sky and the sweat of the arguing clergy. Suddenly, a gust of wind, No, a full-blown divine sneeze yanked the fruit from its cradle and sent it spiraling down like a meteorite on a reality TV drama. It clanged against the stone steps, shattering the serene chant into a chorus of gasps and curses. The crowd froze, half in awe, half in fear, as the apple rolled to a stop amidst a puddle of spilled sacramental wine, its skin smudged with crimson. Priests swore oaths, louder than a megaphone at a rock concert, each accusing the others of stealing the apple's sparkle for personal vanity. The scent of crushed myrtle and salty sea foam mixed with the metallic tang of blood from an accidental cut. One unfortunate priest had sliced his finger on a marble edge while gesturing dramatically. Their robes, once pristine white, now bore splatters of wine, mud, and the occasional stray olive, turning the sanctuary into a chaotic battlefield worthy of a Game of Thrones episode. Voices rose in a cacophony that rattled the temple's bronze doors, while candles guttered, casting jittery shadows that danced like nervous tick-tockers. Even the marble statues seemed to sigh, their stone faces creasing in disbelief at the priest's petty squabbles. As the argument reached a fever pitch, the sky ripped open with a howl that would make a banshee win an Oscar for best screaming performance. Dark clouds churned, slamming the courtyard with rain that smelled like damp earth and old incense, soaking the golden apple and turning it into a slippery, sticky mess. Lightning crackled, illuminating the terrified faces of the priests, their beards standing on end like porcupine quills. The wind roared, tearing loose scrolls and flinging fragrant lotus petals into the air, where they twirled like confetti at a wedding reception. Except the wedding was between chaos and catastrophe. The temple's roof shuddered, the ancient stone walls moaned, and a stray pigeon, apparently auditioning for a horror movie, pooped on a priest's sandal, adding a final note of irreverent disgust. Amid the pandemonium, Lysandra, clad in a simple sea-blue chiton and wielding a silver lyre, stepped forward, her eyes flashing with the calm of a Netflix binge-watcher after the final season. She raised her arms, and the lyre's strings sang a melody so pure it could coax a cat out of a bathtub. The notes floated above the howling gale like a scented candle in a hurricane. With a swift chant invoking Aphrodite's name, she called upon the goddess's love-powered breezes, demanding they turn from wrathful to whispering. The wind obeyed, sighing like a lover sighing after a long goodbye, while the rain softened to a gentle drizzle that smelled of fresh roses and newly baked bread. The golden apple, now glistening with a soft golden hue, lifted gently back onto the altar as if guided by invisible hands. And the priests, cheeks still dripping with rain, stared in stunned reverence. Peace settled over the sanctuary like a warm blanket fresh from the dryer, and the priests, humbled and soggy, bowed their heads in genuine gratitude, muttering apologies that sounded like a chorus of broken karaoke singers. The scent of jasmine and citrus, Aphrodite's signature fragrance, filled the air, banishing the lingering odor of wet stone and pigeon droppings. Lysandra smiled, her cheeks pink as if she'd just finished a marathon of rom-com movies, and whispered that the true power of the golden apple lay not in its shine, but in the love it inspired, a lesson even Zeus could learn after his last thunderbolt mishap. The temple bells chimed, echoing across the hillside, and the storm, now a polite drizzle, pattered against the roof like a contented cat. As the sun broke through the clouds, it painted the marble with a golden hue, sealing the tale of the storm of the golden apple. A saga that would be retold at every feast, with a wink and a nod to the day when love literally stopped the wind. So, when the last thunderclap faded, the marble steps of the Acropolis glittered as if someone had brushed them with powdered sugar. Citizens poured out of their homes, clutching bouquets of crimson roses that smelled sweet enough to make a honeybee blush. Musicians strapped lyres to their backs and marched in a line that swayed like a neon-lit conga line at a modern music festival. Even the stray goats, usually indifferent to human drama, seemed to prance along, their hooves clacking against the stone in a percussive rhythm. The air thrummed with a mix of incense, sea salt, and the faint, unmistakable hint of perfume that would have made any Instagram influencer swoon. At the heart of the celebration stood Lysandra, the once rebel priestess who had coaxed Aphrodite herself to calm the tempest. She wore a crown of intertwined ivy and tiny seashells, a look that would make even a Hollywood queen raise an eyebrow. People whispered that her smile could melt the hardest warrior's armor, and indeed, she handed out love letters written on parchment scented with rosemary, because who doesn't love a card that smells like dinner? Though the gods had a habit of playing tricks, this time they rewarded her with a chorus of doves that nested on her shoulder like feathered paparazzi. Her legend spread faster than gossip at Apollo's tavern, guaranteeing that every future wedding would invoke her name. The procession wound its way through marble arches, each step releasing a puff of rose petals that fluttered like confetti at a birthday bash for Zeus. Lyre strings sang a lilting hymn that rose and fell like the sigh of a lover after a first kiss, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter from youths who tried to outsing the musicians. Vendors hawked honey-glazed figs, their sticky sweetness coating fingers and prompting a few comical grimaces as the sticky goo dripped onto sandals. Children darted between columns, chasing a mischievous cat that wore a tiny golden collar, apparently a gift from Aphrodite, though the cat seemed more interested in stealing fish from a nearby market stall. The whole scene smelled of rose, oil, and the faint metallic tang of sweat, proof that devotion often comes with a side of hard work. By sunset, the procession reached the harbor, where sailors tossed rose-laden garlands onto waiting ships, promising safe voyages and lovers' reunions across the Aegean. The cult of Aphrodite, once confined to a handful of hilltop shrines, now blossomed in every agora, tavern, and even the rough-handed training grounds of hoplites who swore they'd fight for love as fiercely as for glory. Folk songs sprouted like wild vines, some praising the goddess with verses that sounded suspiciously like modern pop hooks. "You gave me love, you gave me life, you gave me a Wi-Fi signal," they sang in jest, to the delight of the crowd. Street painters sprayed vivid frescoes of Aphrodite emerging from sea foam, their colors as bold as a superhero's cape, reminding passers-by that beauty could be both gentle and fierce. In the bustling marketplaces, lovers exchanged cheap wares, shiny shells for a kiss, turning everyday bartering into a playful romance. The night ended with a spectacular firework display that painted the sky in rose gold, each burst echoing like a lover's heartbeat against the dark. Old veterans who'd once mocked the cult as mere sentimentality now clapped with throaty grins, admitting that even a war-hardened heart can melt under a well-timed rose petal. As lanterns floated down the river, they carried wishes that smelled of lavender, cinnamon, and the lingering echo of lyre strings, promising that Aphrodite's touch would linger in kitchens, classrooms, and battlefields alike. Lysandra slipped away into the shadows, her silhouette merging with the moonlit columns. A reminder that true influence often works behind the scenes, much like a director who never appears on screen, but makes the whole movie great. And so, love and beauty wove themselves into the very fabric of daily Greek life. A tapestry as vibrant and messy as a party, where everyone brings their own wine,